This song. Here we go. The Lord is my shepherd, everybody. The Lord is my shepherd. He goes before me. He goes before me. Defender behind me. Defender behind me. Y'all been practicing. I won't fear. I won't fear. I'm filled with anointing. I'm filled with anointing. Thank you, Jesus. My cup's overflowing. My cup's overflowing. No weapon can harm me. No weapon can harm me. Jesus. I won't fear. I won't fear. People of God sing hallelujah. Hallelujah. I am not alone. I am not alone. Hey, He's my comfort. He's my comfort. And He always holds me close. Somebody just shout Jesus right there. He always guides me. He always guides me. Through mountains and valleys. Through mountains and valleys. His joy is refreshing. His joy is refreshing. Restores my soul. Restores my Say this with confidence. Mercy and goodness. Mercy and goodness. Ooh, oh, give me assurance. Give me assurance. Oh, that I'll see your glory. I'll see His glory. Oh, face to face, face to say your spirit lives within me. So I will walk in your peace. I will walk in your Say it again, your spirit lives now say this, my victory, my victory, my victory, my victory. Say your spirit lives within. So I will walk in your peace. Thank you, Jesus. Your spirit lives within me. Say it, say my victory, my victory.
Good evening, KLM family. How's everybody doing tonight? God bless you and welcome to Wednesday night Fireside Chat. I hope you all are doing well, and I hope everything is good with you. Listen, y'all already know I love that joint. I love that. The reminder that we are not alone, and because we're not alone, He's worthy of all honor, all glory, all praise. So glad to have everybody in with us tonight. Listen here, as you guys come in, don't forget to share, right? Invite others to join us tonight as we go through this fireside chat. So it's our Bible study, right? We're going to walk through some text. We're going to hopefully be encouraged and grow. So invite others to join us tonight. And I'll tell you, tonight we're going to talk about subject matter that we're talking about is called the pivot, right? The pivot. So stay with me. I got you. We'll go into it a little bit. I'm on a new setup tonight. So if you all can, please let me know if you're hearing me well, if you're seeing me well. I just want to make sure that everything has been worked out and that we are good. Now, as you do that, I just want to say again, just welcome. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Jay, Boss Jackson, glad to have you in with us. Good to see you, Miss Lori. APJP, glad to have you, sir. Glad to have you in with us tonight. Marquita, glad that you could join us. Miss Regina, good to see you. Good to see you, Miss Toya, Miss Shirley. Thank you all for jumping in tonight. I don't count it. Take it lightly, right? That you guys would take time out of your schedule because it's not me. I know you're not tuning in for me, but it's helpful that I'm not talking to myself. Is that right? So grateful that all of you were able to jump on tonight. I see you, Miss Monica. How you doing? Katie, good to see you. Cassandra, good to have you, ma'am. Thank you all for jumping in tonight. And like I said, continue to share. Continue to invite others in. I believe tonight is going to be a good time. I talked a little, actually, I gave y'all a hint on what we talking about, but we'll get there. We'll get there. Few housekeeping pieces though that we do have to mention before I jump in. Good to see you, Miss Leah. Glad to have you tonight. A few things I do just want to mention to make sure that we are all on the same page with. So as you already know, we are still in our 21-day fast, right? So we're still in our 21-day fast. So I'm encouraging you to continue to fast, continue to press in, continue to search for God, continue to seek Him. He says in Jeremiah 29:13 that when we seek Him with our whole heart, we'll find Him, right? And so this is a great space, a great opportunity, a great moment in time to chase after God. So I encourage you, continue with your fast. If you haven't been fasting, then jump in, right? No harm, no foul. If you have been fasting, then continue I encourage you to continue in that. Minister Kim actually did an amazing job last week talking about fasting, right? So if you've got questions, concerns, not quite sure, then I would encourage you to check out last week's Fireside Chat. Minister Kim did an amazing job just talking around that subject of fasting. So definitely want to encourage you to continue with that. And then with that, this Saturday, we are in the building for 8 a.m. prayer. So definitely come and join us as we are seeking God's face, right? And as we gather collectively, it is God's going to talk. He's going to speak back. And that's what we're looking for in this time, right? We're looking to get closer to Him. We're looking to hear Him more clearly. And we're looking so that we can follow Him better. All right. So just want to encourage you to continue with your fast. And then upcoming, so 8 a.m. And then, so again, remember Saturday, 8 a.m. we are in the building for prayer. And then Sunday, of course, right? Y'all already know we here Sunday, 11 a.m. for worship. And if you can, definitely join us. If you can be in the building, definitely we would love to see your face in the place. But just a couple other things coming up. So in February, our friend, Prophet Nate Saint Eloy will be with us again in the building. He's been with us online. He has been with us in person, and every single time has been an amazing experience. It's been a great move of God. So again, just want to encourage you that if you're in the city, in the area, or if you want to plan a trip to GR, February is always a good time. Well, weather, but February is no better time. Right, February 26th, we got Prophet Nate in the building with us. And then, listen, April 23rd, we've got none other than Prophet Ryan Lestrange. So as Pastor D mentioned, right, Prophet Nate and some of the other prophets who've been with us, they've all come, they all kind of have come from Prophet Ryan Lestrange. So if you think you've had a good time before, then I guarantee we're going to have an amazing time in the Lord in April when he comes into the building. So just wanted to remind you of those two things, keep you up to date. And so that way, when they come, keep them in your mind, keep them pressed forward. And matter of fact, while we're praying, pray for those days, right? Pray for what God is going to do. Pray for what God is currently doing and his movement forward in the building, in the house, and with us. All right. So just those two pieces of information. And then now there is prayer this Saturday, but there will not be prayer in the building next week, Saturday. And the reason for that, Pastor mentioned on Sunday, is that we lost a family member, right? Sister Pam Dukes, some of you know as Mary Pam, we lost her. And so services will be on the 28th. So there won't be prayer that Saturday, not this Saturday, but next Saturday, no prayer, due to the services for Sister Pam. And before I jump into tonight's lesson, because I just want to say something about Sister Pam, Mama Pam is what I call it, right? If you knew her, if you had an opportunity, she was the ultimate encourager, yo. Like, if you were doing whatever it was, if you were doing what God called you to do to the best of your ability, she was your cheerleader, like every single time. And so I just want to really quick share with you, like, because she was important, not just to KLM, but she was important to me, right? She, on more than one occasion over the last 10 years, has found ways to just sneak in encouragement, sneak in words of wisdom to help me keep pushing, right, in some of my most difficult times. So I just give you this quick example. The last time I preached was the last Sunday in November, right? I don't even remember what I preached, honest. But sermon was what it was. God did what he was going to do. Like, I believed I did everything I was supposed to, right? No harm, no foul. And then by Tuesday, I'm in this mental battle, right? The enemy is, he's talking, he's cunning, so he's creeping up on me. And he's like, that wasn't any good, right? Yeah, you're not quite what you think you are. Right. And so all these things begin to creep in, and I'm used to it, right? I understand the way things go. And some of y'all are going to experience this, right? Because some of you have been quiet, but God is calling you to the front. And so here's the thing, that anytime you get to moving in your natural God-given space, you feel great, right? It feels wonderful. It feels amazing. But you do have to contend with the descent, right? It's what I call the descent from the mountain, right? We watched it in scriptures with Elijah. We watch it in scriptures with Moses. So you have to be careful about that descent, because that's when the enemy wants to play with you. He wants to talk to you. And so he's in this space and he's talking to me, right? And he's telling me, nah, dog, that wasn't it. That wasn't. And I'm struggling. I'm not gonna lie to you. I know what it is, but I'm saying, come on, dog, come on. I did what I was supposed to do. That's all I can do. That's all I ever want to do. And I'm going through this mental battle. And then he went a step too far, right? Because the following week, Pastor RJ Marshall was coming for our Men's Day. And then he says to me, now look at this. You watch what you did last week, and then watch what happens when he shows up Sunday. Now, for me, he went too far, right? Because I'm not about comparison. I never have been. And so my response in the moment was, and if he comes that Sunday and completely wrecks the building, he should. He absolutely should. He is a man of God. He is a man of integrity. He knows his word. He has a prophetic gift that is serious, and he's about business. So if God uses him to completely dump the building, I'm not mad about that, right? So this is my battle that I was having on Tuesday. And now I got a call that I missed, so I went to go check my voicemail. Well, unbeknownst to me, there was a voicemail from Mama Pam from Sunday. So here's what's funny. I laugh because I'm in this battle on Tuesday, but God gave me reinforcements on Sunday. Message for another time. So she leaves a message, and it's always the same. Hey, baby. She says, I just want to let you know that you gave me a lot to think about today. She said, you did your best and it was good. She's, she said, you did your best and that's all you had to do and that was enough. I just wanted to let you know to keep going. Y'all don't understand. Like, this wasn't her first time doing this. Unfortunately, it was her last, but it wasn't her first. And I still got the voicemail saved and I probably won't ever delete it. But that's who she was, and that's how she was, and that's how she continued always to encourage and push me. So I'm gonna miss Sunday mornings running around trying to get things set up and stopping by that same seat on the second row and giving her a hug. I'm gonna miss it. Now, I'm grateful to God that I got through this story this time without crying, because every time I thought about it, I started to shed tears. But that's who she was. And that's what the body ought to be. Right? We ought to be in the space where we can be the body to each other. And sometimes when we follow what God says, or just follow the unction of the Spirit, we are giving people reinforcements for battles that we don't know they're going through. You hear me? So when I love every time she would come, hey baby, how you doing? That hey baby every single time got me. Right? So I love it. And I appreciate, so I thank God for Mama Pam. I thank God that she had space in my life over these last 10 years since we've been at KLM. I mean, it doesn't matter what I did. It doesn't matter what it was. If it was for him, she was a cheerleader. And I am grateful to God to have had her in my life. And so I can't wait to see her again. And I'm gonna keep pushing because I got to. I'm gonna keep pushing, and I encourage you to do the same. Keep pushing. See, this is the hope that Paul talks about. He says that we're not like most men, right? Miserable when death comes, but we understand that there is something more. We understand that there's something bigger. We understand that there is a day coming where the family gets back together, and we get a chance to honor and worship our King, connected, completely connected, never to be severed again. So I encourage you just to keep pushing. And I just wanted to say that because I probably wasn't going to ever say that again. But I appreciate who she was and what she did. And for me, for my household, for my family, because she never stops. She's at checking on me. She's checking on the kids. She's checking on Glinda. She was always checking, and I appreciate that from her. So with that being said, that's enough. We're going to jump into tonight's message, tonight's word. And so that way I don't keep you. Got about 20, 25 minutes. We'll rock this thing out and then we will be on our way. All right. So if you can, I want you to roll with me tonight over to Genesis 13. Okay. I want to roll over to Genesis 13. Now, the cool thing about the book of Genesis, right? One of the amazing things is that it's the book of the beginning, right? It's the book that talks about how things got cracking, how things got started. And so in the first 11 chapters, you're going to find 4 major events, right? So you'll find 4 major events. You've got creation, you've got the flood, you've got, oh God, and my mind is slipping. You got creation, you got the flood, you got the fall of man, and then there's one more, and my mind's off. But then from chapter 12, for the rest of the book, we don't follow 4 events, but we end up following 4 people, right? And so we get this, we get to see God on a macro level, and then we get to see God on a micro level, right? We get to see God as he sits over all and looks over, but then we get to see how God intricately walks with the life of us as humanity in the rest of the book. So tonight we're going to pick up Genesis 13, and where we find ourselves is Abraham is now following God, right? So Genesis 12, God comes and says, yo, Abraham, I need you to roll with me, okay? I'm going to send you somewhere. I'm not going to tell you where, but I need you to roll with me. Just believe me. And if you're willing to believe me, I'm going to make you the father of many nations. I'm going to make your descendants like the sands on the seashore. I'm going to make your descendants like the stars in the sky, innumerable. Right? So this is where we find ourselves. So Abraham is moving along, and if you will, All right, let's pick it up at verse 5. Let's pick it up at verse 5. So it says, now Lot was moving about with Abram, also had flocks and herds and tents, but the land could not support them while they stayed together, for their possessions were so great that they were not able to stay together. And quarreling arose between Abram's herdsmen and the herdsmen of Lot. The Canaanites and the Perizzites were also living in the land at that time. So Abram said to Lot, let's not have any quarreling between you and me, or between your herdsmen and mine, for we are brothers. It is not the whole land before you? Let's part company. If you go to the left, I'll go to the right. If you go to the right, I'll go to the left. Right? So now here it is. What we have here is Abram, at this time, his name hasn't changed, right? So Abram is on this journey. He brought his nephew along, Lot, and they've gotten to a space where they can no longer coexist, right? Things have just gotten too big, and they are just too big for the small space that they're in. So they can no longer coexist. So Abram is like, listen, we're not going to argue. We're not going to fuss. We're not going to fight about nothing. We're just going to part ways. And he gives Lot the choice of direction. Right? So he says, yo, whatever you choose, just to keep it cool, keep it copacetic, if you choose left, I'll go right. If you want to go right, I'm going to go left. We're not going to argue. We're not going to fuss. We're going to remain cordial, but we are going to part ways. Okay? Now, that would seem almost as though Abram was setting himself up for failure, right? Because you're going to give Lot the choice of the best direction. Doesn't really seem to make sense. Right? But he does. And so it says that Lot looked up in verse 10. Lot looked up and saw that the whole plain of the Jordan was well watered, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt toward Zoar. This was before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. So Lot chose for himself a whole plain of Jordan and set out towards the east. All right. So tonight, so with that being said, so Abram and Lot are now parting. This is where we find ourselves, right? Abram and Lot are now parting ways. All right. Now, let me tell you a quick story. So there's a podcast that's called I Am Athlete, right? It was started by 4 former football players, 4 brothers, right, who just sit down and talk about all kinds of things. They talk about life, they talk about family, and it was at the time different. Right, because he hadn't seen these athletes and sitting down to have these kind of conversations. So the podcast took off real quick, and I mean that thing became big overnight. And it became big in the essence that now you had people wanting to sponsor. That you had it wasn't only 4 men sitting and having a conversation, but it took off and became like its own show. It had its own following and it had its own money being made. Well, here's the thing. What started off as 4 friends just having a conversation now became business. And so the friends had to now backtrack and handle business. So they were trying to figure out how to handle business, and they just could not come to an agreement on how to do things. So 2 of the 4 left the show, right? Now, they said, hey, the show was going in a direction we weren't really comfortable with. Also, we couldn't get the business together, so we're just going to leave. Now, it almost felt like that would have been a blow, right? A negative, because here it is that this podcast is taking off. These 4 African-American men are talking about things that are showing how complex, how beautiful the Black man's mind is, right? They're talking about family, they're talking about responsibility, and now they're breaking up. Well, the I Am Athlete podcast continued, right? He just got 2 other athletes to come in, and they continue on their way. But here's where I'm going. The other 2 gentlemen who left decided that they needed to do something different. So they didn't leave the podcast space, but they decided to create their own. And in creating their own, they brought in another brother with them. And I love this one, Ryan Clark. He's my boy, and he's a believer. So I'm hands down, I'm all the way with it, right? So they create their new podcast, and they call their new podcast The Pivot. Okay. So tonight, I want to talk about the pivot. See, because these four men started on a journey, right? And they had to part ways. And 2 of them had to figure out how to do things differently. So they said, we had to pivot, right? We had a purpose in mind, but the process had to be a little bit different than we had previously thought it was going to be. Okay, some of y'all are tracking with me, and you already know where I'm going. In life, we have a direction that we're going. There are things that we're after, there are things that we want to see happen, there are things that God has promised, there are things that God wants to do for us, right? So there's a lot going on and we're heading in a direction, but a lot of times the direction or the process will change. And we have to be okay with a pivot. Hear me. We've got to be okay with the fact that things are not going to be the way we originally thought they were. And if we don't learn how to pivot along our journey, we're going to find ourselves in a problem. We're going to find ourselves in a space where we're disappointed, where we're angry, where we can't figure out how to do. And worst case scenario, we will find ourselves not where we intended to be. So tonight, my encouragement, I want to talk about the fact that I want to encourage us as we move forward to always be ready to pivot. So Abraham, let's get back to the text, right? We're not far from the text. Now, here's the thing. If you flip back one chapter in Genesis 12, Genesis 12 opens up and says, the Lord had said to Abram, leave your country, your people, and your father's household, and go to the land that I will show you. He says, I will make you into a great nation and I will bless you. I will make your name great and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all the peoples of the earth will be blessed through you. So here it is. God says, yo, Abraham, roll with me and I'm going to make you a blessing. So Abraham's like, I'm out, right? It feels like Abraham's like, I'm out. Right? God, you want me to go? I don't know where we're going, but I'm going to go, right? So Abraham's like, let's go. So they start off on the journey. He's going in the direction that God would have him to go. He's moving in the way that God would have him to move. But here's the thing. He was moving with him, his nephew, and his belongings. So Abraham's like, all right, we got this. I don't know where we're going. But I know that in the end, the purpose is that God is going to be glorified, I'm going to be blessed, and the earth is going to be blessed because of it. That's the overall purpose. But I don't know the direction. I don't really know where, but I'm down for the ride. So Abraham begins his journey. Now, I have to imagine that Abraham didn't expect to end up in an argument. He didn't expect to have fighting between his men and Lot's men. He didn't expect that they weren't going to be able to coexist, because if he had thought they would not be able to coexist, I doubt he would have told him to come along for the ride, right? Y'all know how we do, right? You want to go somewhere. You've got some people that you might want to ride with you, but come on, come here. You know you got that one friend that you don't want on this trip, so you don't invite him. Right? Come on, let's just be honest. You know, you got that one friend, like they'll ride with me for 30 minutes. They might be good with me for about an hour, but they are terrible when we get on a 3 and 4 hour trip because they don't know how to sit still. So I'm not inviting them. Right? So you're thinking that as I'm on my journey, what's going to make the most sense to make this trip not only enjoyable, but it's something that I can do, that we can achieve, and everybody's going to be on the same page. We're going to enjoy ourselves. It's going to be good. And you're willing to take the smoke of the friend that you didn't invite when you get back. Right? You're just willing for that. Like, bro, you already know that. You're terrible in a car ride. Right? So we do it all the time. So Abraham's no different. He's a person. We think the same way. We all think that way. So Abraham's thinking, all right, this will be a good trip. I'm going to take nephew with me. We're going to see the blessings of God. It's going to be all good. So when we arrive at chapter 13, right? When we arrive at chapter 13, and I see you, APJP, because you're on something right there, right? You're going to ask who's going. I see you, sir. I like that. But as we arrive at 13, we're now in a space where Abram was like, all right, we got to pivot. Got to do something different. This isn't working this way, right? This journey isn't going to be able to continue peacefully, joyfully, the way I believe God intended if we keep company. So Abraham says, all right, I'm good with a pivot. What's the pivot? Abraham's like, the pivot is that we got to part ways, right? The pivot is that I can't take you where I'm going. The pivot is that my initial intention, my initial thought, my initial desire isn't going to be able to be fulfilled. I got to pivot. So he goes to Lot with the plan for the pivot. And Lot, because he's not necessarily in it for the journey that God has, but he's in it for the journey with Abram, right? So Lot is like, yeah, I'm with you. And realistically, he looks around and says, so if we're going to part ways, then let me go ahead and take what's going to allow me to flourish the most, right? So Lot is like, yo, I'm going to go east. Because look at all this green grass. Look at all the land. Look at all that I can gain and accumulate if I go this way, right? So Lot's like, dope, I'm out. I'm going to go this way. Now, here's the thing that I'm understanding and learning sometimes about the pivot that we have to take. Because sometimes the pivot is based on the fact that we've done something not quite right. Right? We're going in the right direction. We're going after the right purpose, but we've tried to go after it our own way. Y'all know, right? God says that I want you to fast 21 days. And I want you to fast bread, and I want you to fast sugar. Now, God, I love you, and you love me. I mean, you made me. You're fully aware of how you made me. You do realize that bread is my nighttime snack. You do realize that, like, I eat a piece of bread before I eat a piece of meat. Maybe we should alter how we're going to get this done. Right? We're willing to go after the purpose, but we sometimes want to go after it with our own procedures. And that's what Abraham did. Because if you watch verse 1, chapter 12, it says, the Lord had said to Abram, leave your country, your people, and your father's household. Pause. Abram was good to leave his country. Abram was good to leave his people. Now, by people, he's meaning, your friends, those surrounding you in this city, those that you're familiar with, right? Those who live here with you. But where Abraham messed up is that he didn't leave his father's household. Notice, because Lot is his nephew. Yes, Sister Monica, the nephew was never invited. Lot was never invited for the journey, right? So the Bible doesn't tell us why Abram took Lot, but here's the thing, he's his nephew. So it's obvious that his father is gone, right? Because it says that Lot was the son of, forgive me, I'm gonna jump real fast. I got this. So Lot was a son of Haran, right? Who would have been Abram's brother. Now, from the best of our understanding, Haran is no longer around. So Abram is taking on a role of caretaker, right? He's taking on a responsibility with the nephew. Nephew, I got you. You know what I'm saying? If your dad ain't around, I got you. I'm going to make sure that everything's good with you. But here's the thing. Whether he took him because he was looking out for him, whether he took him because he just didn't want to be alone on the journey, whatever the reason he took Lot should have never been there, right? So what would have been a journey peaceful in whatever direction God was choosing, now Abram has to pivot because he has to correct the instructions he was originally given. A lot of times, not every time, but a lot of times we'll run into the moment in a situation where it calls for us to pivot because we have adjusted the pathway to fit us. We've adjusted the procedures to help us. We've adjusted the mechanism by which we're going to accomplish God's plan by doing something that makes it a little bit more comfortable for us, a little easier to swallow, a little more palatable, something that doesn't quite call for us to be alone as much, right? Some of us don't like being alone. Okay, I don't like being alone. So I'll probably take people with me on a journey that I should be going on alone. Right? I don't necessarily like that feeling of being uncomfortable. So I might adjust to make it a little bit easier for me, make it a little bit more something that I can handle. But here's the thing. God is not interested in you doing it in a way that makes it palatable for you. God is not interested in making the process comfortable for me. God is interested in making the process and to get us to the purpose. He is interested in that far more than he is in our comfort. He's more interested in that more than he is in our feelings. He's more interested in his will, in his desire, and his ultimate outcome. He is much more interested in that than he is about how we think or feel or desire the situation to be. So sometimes he calls us to a pivot because we've got to get back into the right space, right? Because here's the thing. Abram was good. He was glad to do the will of God, but he was going to do the will of God on his own terms. God has never been about allowing us to determine the terms by which we fulfill his purpose. I don't care what you do. You can look up, down, left, right, through this thing, and you're not going to find God bending his will to humanity. He didn't even bend his will to his own son. So what makes you think he's going to bend it for you and me? His son sat in the garden and was like, yo, can I get a plan B? And he was like, yo, no, you can't. Right? And so if he's not doing it for the one he sent, he's not going to do it for the ones he's made. Right? So we have to figure out how to get back into the ultimate will, purpose, and the direction that God desires, not our own. So sometimes the pivot is to get back on course. Right? Sometimes the pivot is we have made a mistake along the way. And sometimes, I'll be honest with you, this is the one that's a little hard to swallow. Sometimes the pivot is just the reaping of the seeds we previously sown. David loved God with all his heart. The Bible says that he was a man after God's own heart, right? And so it says that he loved God, he chased God, and David desired to build the temple. He gathered all the belongings and he wanted to build this temple for God, and God was like, pause, pivot. You have shed too much innocent blood. I can't let you do it. Now, I'm not going to take it away from your bloodline. I'm not going to take it away from your family. I'm not going to take it away because I've made promises of who I've called you to be and what I desire you to be. So I'm not going to snatch it from you. But I'm just going to slide it on over to allow Solomon to build the temple because you can't. So David had to pivot. See, oftentimes the pivot is not in the purpose of God, but it is in our desires of our own heart. Right? The pivot is not in the purposes of God, but it is in the desires of our very own hearts. Because here's the thing, what God is changing is not his ultimate purpose. It's not his ultimate destination, but he may change the procedures to get there. He's not changing what he desires from us or what he desires to give to us, but he may change how he does it. He may do it differently than we've assumed. He may do it differently than we thought. He may do it with different people than we thought were going to be there. I'll be honest with y'all. I never expected to be at KLM 10 years ago, but I was. I never expected that I was going to have a woman that always came up and said, hey, baby, how you doing? You're gifted, you're talented, do what God got for you. Keep pushing, keep going. I never expected that that was what it was going to be, but I had to pivot, and that's how I arrived here. And I had to pivot based on some mistakes that were previously made. So now we arrive in this space, and now God is doing what God does. But the purpose of God has never changed, just the how he desired we were going to get there. And here's the thing. The way we're getting there isn't even different to him. It's just different to you and me. You say that again. The purpose, the procedure, the direction, it's not different from what God expected. It's not different from what God planned. It's not different from what God has already prescribed for us. It's different to you and me because we thought it was going to be a certain way. So we have to pivot, not so that because God made some mistake, but we have to pivot so that we stay in his ultimate will. We have to pivot so that we stay in his perfect will. We have to pivot to put our hearts and our minds in the right space. We have to pivot. The pivot is not on God. The pivot is on you and me. We have to change. So Abram has to pivot. You and I will arrive at moments, days, and times where a pivot will be required. And that's okay. Don't lose heart because he's calling you to pivot. Don't lose steam because he's calling you to pivot. Don't lose your will and desire to chase him, to go after the things of God, because he's calling you into a pivot, because he's not calling the pivot to break you, but he's calling the pivot to continue in making you. He's calling the pivot to get you into the right space that he can form you, that he can grow you, that he can build you. He's calling you into the right space, so that his purpose, his will be fulfilled in your life and ultimately in the earth. So we're called to pivot. And some of us have begun this year. We knew where we were going. We saw it. We were clear on what God, you're going to do this. You're going to do that. I know, I believe you. I'm here for it. I'm pushing for it. And then now we're in January and it doesn't look like what we thought. And now we're already arriving at a space where we're wondering about the ultimate purpose. We're wondering if this ultimate goal is actually what it's going to be. We're questioning if things are quite right, because now we're seeing that we've got to do them differently than we thought. And we're wondering, did we get it wrong? And I'm encouraging you to tell you that you haven't gotten it wrong. He's just calling you to a pivot so that you can be more efficient. He's calling you to a pivot so that you can walk in the nature and the desire of who he's called you to be. He's calling you to pivot, to put you in the proper place to fulfill the purpose he's called you to. So pivot. Pivot. Some of you already know. So a couple of weeks ago, right, I injured my knee. And so I had to have surgery. Monday made a week. So I'm about 10 days post-surgery. So it's probably even now, right, while you guys, the angle you got me on, because I'm sitting on the floor. Y'all know I tell y'all everything. I tell y'all too much, but whatever, right? We here, we family. It's Fireside. Come on in, we talk, right? So I'm sitting on the floor. I've spent the last 2 weeks sitting on the floor. And if y'all know me, y'all know I've hated sitting on this floor for 2 weeks, right? Because I got to keep my legs straight for a total of 6 weeks, right? So I'm 1 week in, and I still got 4.5 weeks to go of keeping this leg completely straight. That's different. It's not what I expected my year to look like. And this is not the only thing that has not necessarily caught me off guard, but it's not the only thing in which I've got to do things a little bit differently than I thought. But God called me and he said, listen, he said, I know this is not what you thought, but I need you to do them the way I want you. I need you to pivot because I need you to do things the way I want them done, not necessarily the way you were planning on. Right? I need you to do things the way I'm asking you to do, not your plan, but mine. right? And some of it is, I just need you to sit down so I can talk to you. That's me. So I don't know what your pivot looks like. I don't know what it looks like for I don't know what it looks like for to have things shaken up. I don't know if he's already shaken up your plans, but if he hasn't, at some point this year, he will. Not because you're wrong, not because you're evil, but because he wants to make sure that ultimately his will is accomplished and that we do not find ourselves in the wrong spaces, doing the wrong thing. Because watch this. If Abraham had continued on with Lot, but God says, I don't want anybody with you. Who's to say that Lot doesn't begin to question what God has going on? Who's to say that Lot doesn't get to talking to his uncle and changing his uncle's heart or changing his uncle's mind? You know, God wants to go left, but Lot's like, yeah, Unc, I don't really know about that. You know, we got a lot to lose because obviously, right? Lot was looking out for his gain. He was looking out for what he had. He was looking out for his livestock. So it inevitably it could have arisen. I'm not just throwing out, right? It could have been where Lot is like, nah, I think we should do this, or I think we should stay here. I think we should make this move, right? I think, and maybe Unc would have been like, that makes sense, nephew. That makes sense. And now you got Abraham, the father of faith, going in the wrong direction because he listened to someone who should have never been on the journey in the first place. Right? So it calls for us to pivot so that we can fulfill the will of God the way he desires. So if he's calling you to it, handle it. Right. And so this is, and I told you, like I started off, I said that the name of the new podcast with the three brothers is The Pivot. And here's the thing about their new podcast, right? Because I was trying to sit down and look at it, and I'm like, but they started off so well. Right? It was a beautiful picture of four brothers walking in with like-minded, great hearts. You know, it started off so well. But the thing is that neither group lost their audience. So rather than one show that's quality, we now have two that are quality. But then on The Pivot, right, they bring on a third brother who is phenomenal communicator, great dude, but he's a believer, right? He is a man of integrity. And I've always been a fan of him. I was a fan of him as he was an athlete. I was a fan of him when he became a broadcaster, and I'm a fan of him still to this day, right? His name is Ryan Clark. So now Ryan gets included in a show that Ryan wasn't included in before. Now the world gets a chance to see Ryan in a brand new light that they've never seen Ryan in before. And even on the old show, I Am Athlete, now we bring on two other athletes that the world hadn't heard from before. Right? So now the world gets introduced to more people, more smart young men, more great intelligent athletes, more men who are trying to build their community, more men who are trying to show that their lives are more than just a game. Now we've got two shows that can focus on so much more. And now we get exposure to others. Watch this. If you're willing to do what God calls you to, if you're willing to pivot the way he calls you to, he's going to bring about a new day, not just for you, but for the other people who are already designed to be in your pathway. There are others who you are designed to help. There are others who you are designed to reach. But if you continue going in the direction that you deem to be more profitable for you because it's more comfortable, because it's easier, because it doesn't require as much, if we think we can go down that pathway, then we are going to miss on people that God has already positioned us to help. So we've got to pivot because it's not just for our benefit, but it is always going to be for his glory and then for our good. Right? Our ability to pivot is going to be monumental in the lives of the people who are going to be along the pathway that we have to go down. If Abram doesn't pivot, he never becomes the father of faith. If Jesus in the garden doesn't pivot from his own desires, then do we ever have salvation? Right? If the disciples don't pivot from their own depression, if Peter doesn't pivot after failing God and dealing with his depression and going back to fishing because he didn't know where else to go, if Peter doesn't pivot and follow the purposes of God, then how do we get the church established by Peter on the day of Pentecost when he preaches and 3,000 souls enter in? Y'all, we've got to follow him the way he's called us to follow him. So if it means that we've got to pivot from our own desires, from our own pathways, from our own thinking, then that's what we have to do. Because then we will get to see the flourishing of God and his will in our life and in the earth. Absolutely right, Katie. It's bigger than us. Always has been. Always will be. God says his thoughts are higher than our thoughts. His ways are higher than our ways. What he's looking at is the ending. We are only stuck in the middle and we can only see from our vantage point, but God is looking at the entire thing. So when God is directing us, he's not directing us trying to figure it out. He's not looking at plan B. He's not renegotiating the pathway. God is taking you along the way that he desired from the very beginning. So it's on us to fall in line, not on him to adjust his direction. So my encouragement tonight is that if the pivot arrives, take it. Don't complain. Hear me. But now I'm going to be honest with you, right? It's okay to be disappointed. It's okay. It's okay to be like, but I was hoping, it's okay. But do not let your emotions, do not let your feelings make you stay in a place that God has called you out of. It's okay. It's okay. Right? It's okay to mourn a loss. It's okay to mourn a relationship. It's okay to mourn the redirection. It's okay to mourn the fact that what you thought was going to be isn't quite right. It's okay. But don't you dare get stuck in the mourning. Don't you dare get stuck in the pain. Don't you dare get stuck in the old pathway that is not going to serve you. Because if you continue to try to go down that same old pathway, now you are walking away from the purpose of God. See, because here's the thing, him changing the pathways, him changing the procedures has not changed his purpose. The purpose still remained. He told Abraham had to pivot, but the purpose for what God called him to had never changed. But if Abraham does not pivot, now he's walking away from the purpose, right? Our inability to pivot, our inability to pivot is what will take us out of God's ultimate will. Our inability to change, to move with him, to flow with him is what's going to then cause us to now land in a space where we're walking in disobedience. And I know you don't want that. I know I don't want that. We don't want that. That's not how we want to live our lives. We want to live our lives obedient. We want to live our lives loving him. We want to live our lives in step with his will and purpose. So that means that there will come a day where we will be called to pivot and we have to do it. Some of us, we've already arrived. I mean, hey, we've already arrived at the need to pivot on January 18th. Right? It's only January 18th and we got to pivot. That's cool. Pivot early. Some of us will hear him request a pivot in March. Some of us will hear him request a pivot in June. Some of us will have him request a pivot in September or November or December. But wherever the request is made, pivot. Whenever the request is made, pivot. And I believe with all my heart, because I'm seeing it in the chat. Y'all are saying that you've already had to pivot. Thank you. So I'm not the only one. And this wasn't just for me. So thank you. Right? Some of us have already arrived at the need to pivot. So my encouragement is pivot. Pivot with everything you got. Put everything into the pivot just like you were in your original direction. Don't you dare back down. Don't you dare quit. I'm talking about when after you pivot, pick your pace up back to 100 miles an hour and you go. When you pivot, you move like God has called you to, and you strike out and you do whatever he's called you to do. Be who he's called you to be. Handle the business he's called you to handle, because now you are walking closer into the purpose and the will for your life, and we will get to see God's glory manifested in our lives, in our community, in our church, in our homes, if we pivot properly. So let's pivot. And here's the thing. The pivot is going to take you into new spaces, right? Because the pivot says, I can't go that way, we're going to go this way. But it's going to cause you to probably have to take on more ownership, right? You're going to have to take more responsibility. The pivot is going to require you to be more committed. It's going to require more dedication. The pivot is going to require a little bit more, because it's breaking us out of our comfort zone. It's taking us out of where our natural bags. It's going to push us. It's going to propel us to now have to acquire new skills, to now have to grow, and growth hurts. But the pivot, I promise you, because he promises, if we can pivot, we will see by the end of the year what God has done. That the purpose hasn't changed, just the pathway. Yes, absolutely, Katie. The reward of the pivot, right? When we can listen, them three brothers, the two brothers who left to create their own show, The Pivot, now have their own business. Now are growing financially. Now are growing influentially. Now they're growing. They're finding themselves in spaces that they may not have gone if they would have stayed before. But now they get a chance. They have to go out and create their own way. And now the show grows differently. The pivot is worth it, y'all. And I'm telling you that while I tell that to myself. The pivot will be worth it. The pivot will be worth it. The pivot will be worth it. Just make it. That's it. That's all I got tonight, y'all. So I love you. I appreciate you guys for rolling with me, hanging out tonight. Excuse me. I got this leg. Got to get it more comfortable. But I appreciate you guys being here tonight. I appreciate you listening through. And listen, if this word blessed you, the first thing I'm going to ask you to do is pray about it. Ask God to solidify it in your heart and in your mind. Second thing I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to ask you to share it. Because you're probably not the only one. Right? Just like tonight, I realized that I'm not the only one. We are in a pivot. KLM's in a pivot. Well, watch what she looks like after we come out this joint, y'all. All right. So 1, pray about it. Get that. Like David said, we got to learn to hide the word in our hearts so that we don't sin. 2, I want you to share it. And then if you're led to tonight, you have the opportunity to sow and to give into the word as well. So giving information is there on the screen for you, right? You can text KLM to 73256, or you can give you can go to give2klm.com. So this opportunity, you can sow a seed, give your offering. If you haven't given your tithe, you're more than welcome to do that in this moment. But if it blessed you and you feel led to, so if it blessed you and you don't necessarily feel led to, but you believe in the principle of sowing, so. Right? It's a good opportunity. If you believe that this is a good space, if you believe that this is where God has you to be, and if you're growing in it, So that's my encouragement. So, all right. But I love y'all. And I appreciate you guys for sticking with me all night. I told you we would be out in about 25 minutes, and we are good. I hope it blessed you tonight. I hope this was encouraging for you. And I hope that it allows you to now begin to move in the direction that God has for you. Because now, watch this. Now that we're in, after we pivot and we adjust our direction, now we can pick up momentum. It would be counterproductive for God to give us momentum in the wrong direction. It would be counterproductive for God to help us to build momentum knowing we're going in the wrong direction. So post pivot, watch out. Things are going to pick up. After your pivot, watch. He's going to move. He's going to move. He's going to move because now we're in the right place. We're going in the right direction with the right mindset, with the right heart, with the right company, right? And he is going to help us to build momentum to fulfill his purpose here in the earth. I love you guys. I hope this word blessed you. And so as a reminder, this Saturday, we are in the building for prayer Saturday morning at 8 a.m. So please join us. Continue, Kurz, again, just continue your fast, continue to seek God, to hear his voice of what he's having you to do, where he wants you to be, how he wants you to align yourself. And join us Saturday as we continue to pray and to seek his face. And then Sunday, of course, we are back in the building at 11 a.m., 2317 Kalamazoo Avenue, Southeast, Grand Rapids, Michigan. If you're in the space, come see us. All right? I love you. I appreciate you. I hope you all have a wonderful evening. And I can't wait to be able to hobble back in the building and be with y'all again. All right? I love you, KLM family. I hope you enjoy your night. I love you. Enjoy it. God bless.